Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day. This week or this day, we're actually going to be taking a look at autism spectrum disorder. And that probably will be one of the more familiar listing of disabilities. So, what is it and how is it defined? So, it's characterized by deficits in social interaction and communication skills, verbal and nonverbal, and it's going to be across multiple contexts, not just academic. These students often have fixated interests or practice repetitive behaviors. They tend to be resistant to changes in environment and daily routines, and they'll sometimes have unusual responses to sensory experiences. If you've ever helped in Special Olympics before, oftentimes these are the students you'll see going around with the headphones on because of all the outside stimulation and noise is a little too much for them to handle. Uh, Autism spectrum is usually identified or evident anyways before the age of 3, and it's called a spectrum because it's a wide variety. Not all students are going to be the same, from mild to severe, so we have a spectrum that is present there. So are there different types of autism spectrum disorder? And they're actually broken down into 5 different disorders and 3 levels of severity. Level 1 is going to be the least severe, and it's going to require some additional supports for the students. Moderate. Level 2 is going to be moderately severe, while level 3 is going to be our most severe and require substantial supports. Now, 30 to 60% of students with ASD also have another coexisting intellectual disability. Some of these students are going to display what we call splinter skills. And this would be an idea of like autistic savants. If you've watched the video that is embedded on course page, how he can draw those buildings with only having seen them by air for just a few minutes is just beyond understanding. And these splinter skills is a talent or ability that's unrelated to other aspects of a person's life. Like they talked about the fact he can draw these buildings, but yet he got lost on the subway. So these are splinter skills that are sometimes present. Now, consistency of severity level. So an individual can have strength in some areas, but have deficits in others. And the characteristics, while it's called a spectrum disorder, the characteristics vary so widely from one individual to the next. Now, how does this work with social communication and interaction? So, social emotional reciprocity. This means that these students, they may not initiate interactions, respond to greetings, or engage in taking turns in conversation. Sometimes it's going to be nonverbal social communication. They may not maintain eye contact. They can have sort of atypical body language or have difficulty interpreting the facial expressions and displays of other people. And sometimes they're going to have problems also with interpersonal relationships because they just may not show interest in other children or in making friends or in typical child play. And this can be because they have difficulty interpreting different social situations and really understanding another person's perspective on an issue. And so they're going to have very few peer friendships. Now, sometimes they'll have restrictive or repetitive behaviors, and these can be stereotypes. So things like the hand flapping, the rocking, repetitive movements, or elaborate rituals. Sometimes it's insistent on sameness, very inflexible, and need to adhere to the same routine. So only eat certain foods or wear certain clothes, insists on others following a certain set of routines. And sometimes they can have excessive reaction to just small changes that might not bother you or I. And they can also have abnormally intense restricted interest. So focus on a certain interest to the exclusion of all else. I will never forget one time I had a student when I was in middle grades who, and this was the time when Despicable Me had first come out, everything was about Minions. That was the end all to end all. He knew everything there was to know about Minions. That was his complete obsession, if you will. That was his sole focus of what he was interested in. And so there's also unusual reactions to sensory input, hypersensitivity, or sometimes there's no reaction. This can be students. One of my friends, her child with autism spectrum, she couldn't handle the texture of denim. And so she could never wear jeans. It had to be sweatpants or slacks, but it could not be denim. Now, increasing prevalent rates. People are talking about this all the time, that the rates of autism are increasing, the number of students diagnosed. And this could be a multitude of reasons. Primarily, the way we diagnose has increased dramatically. So it's very much so improved. So it's easier to diagnose students. There's also increased community and public awareness. There was a time when parents didn't want their students diagnosed because it was considered a horrible, horrible thing. And then changes in this idea of autism spectrum disorder. So now it includes things that are less severe. So students are still diagnosed as being on the spectrum, but they're going to be that level 1, that very mild. Sometimes people claim it's increased risk to environmental toxins or injections and things of that nature. Sometimes it's increasing because students are shifting within the different categories of disability. So these kids do have some legitimate challenges that they're trying to overcome. Social communication behavioral deficits are huge. They tend to struggle academically because of these other difficulties. Sometimes their behavior can be an issue because they can inflict self-injury or demonstrate aggression. There's also higher rates of coexisting physical and mental health conditions. Sensory issues and communication trouble can make healthcare very challenging for children with autism spectrum disorder. So what do we do in the classroom as far as accommodations? So these accommodations are going to be very similar to what we have learned about students with speech and language impairments or other learning disabilities. We want things like visual cues, having extra response time, using computers, alternative responses, note takers, alternative communication systems, picture exchange systems like in the video that's embedded on course pages. We want to partner them with another student who has strong communication skills and is kind and can support them in social situations. We also want accommodations that address the behavior differences. So these behavioral issues often come with the inability to handle change and the sensory issues, and they don't know how to communicate what they're feeling inside. And so reducing noise and other distractions. This can help students with ADHD and also help students with autism spectrum disorder. And so having a separate room for testing or noise reducing headphones. However, that said, some students with autism spectrum need extra simulation. So in other words, having headphones that are providing music or something in the background for them, having clearly established routines in your classroom and written or visual schedules are very helpful for these students. So what are some indicators in young children of autism? Oftentimes you'll see things like avoiding eye contact or physical contact. They prefer to play alone, become agitated when there's even little changes in their routine. They display the stereotype or repetitive behaviors. They don't respond to their name by 12 months, don't point to objects by the time they're 14 months, or don't respond or look at objects when others point to them. They don't do the idea of pretend play or imaginative games by the time they're 18 months, and they don't engage in joint attention. Now, how do you develop functional communication skills with these individuals? The more severe, the more communication skills are required. So one of the main ways is a picture exchange communication system. And this is can be done something along the lines of the AAC, and that is embedded in the video. This is for students who have little or no functional speech. It relies heavily on applied behavioral analysis, that ABA we talked about, to improve communication skills. It uses pictures to convey meaning, and they start with single pictures, and then it expands to sentence strips of pictures, and this forces children to interact with others. So strategies and practices for teachers. if students are having academic difficulties, first and foremost, always go to universal design for learning. Then we also deal with differentiated instruction, explicit instruction, and different learning strategies student can use. If they have behavior issues, working with them on behavior therapy and self-regulation strategies, possibly doing a functional behavior assessment, trying to figure out what the antecedent is, what's causing the behavior, and then developing a behavior intervention plan where we're eliminating that problem behavior because we're replacing it with a more appropriate one. So what are other evidence-based supports we can use in the classroom? We can use visual schedules, a first, then board, video monitoring, timers, visual timers, and then auditory supports, verbal advanced warnings, auditory cues. All those are important to use. And post-secondary options when students are low functioning. Full or part-time paid supported employment. So you have community-based work programs where students with disabilities, they earn a competitive wage, things in food service, clerk or bagger, custodial services. And then there's on-site supported employees who work with others with disabilities. They're going to earn lower salaries. The jobs require minimal skills. So shredding documents, applying mailing labels. And then you're going to also have students who move into independent or partially supported living, where they're working in a residential program and they're living with others in a community. But the most severe students with autism spectrum disorder, most of them tend to remain at home with their family members who care for them.